What if a 5-cent coin hiding in an old collection could be worth thousands, or in an extraordinary case, far more? Some coins become rare because of their condition, others because of a tiny minting mistake that most people would never notice. A weak strike, unusual doubling, a strange rim, or a perfectly preserved surface can completely change a coin's story and value. Stay with us, because the smallest detail may be the one that separates pocket change from a remarkable discovery. Thanks for watching, and for giving your time and support to Old Coin Cave. Let's uncover what others overlooked. A buffalo nickel once looked like a simple 5-cent piece, yet one exceptional example of this series reached $99,000 at auction, proving that the difference between an ordinary coin and a serious numismatic treasure can hide in details most people never notice. That sale involved a 1926 not the 1923 coin sitting in front of us, and that distinction matters because collectors know this series is filled with coins whose true importance only becomes visible under careful examination. Now consider the 1923 buffalo nickel with no mint mark. At first glance, it seems almost too ordinary. The familiar Native American portrait on the obverse, the powerful American bison on the reverse, and no letter beneath the denomination to announce where it was made. But that missing letter is not an error. It tells us the coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, where buffalo nickels were produced without a mint mark. The design itself was created by sculptor James Earl Fraser, not Benjamin Franklin, and it was one of the most distinctive coin designs ever placed into everyday American commerce. Fraser's obverse combined features inspired by Native American subjects, while the reverse presented an American bison that became instantly recognizable across the country. By 1923, however, this beautiful design was also proving difficult to strike sharply and preserve. The raised design elements wore quickly, the date could become weak through circulation, and the broad surfaces were vulnerable to marks and abrasion. So when you hold a 1923 Philadelphia buffalo nickel, you are not simply holding 5 cents from another era. You are holding a small record of American artistry, industrial production, and everyday life from more than a century ago. And there is an important correction hidden inside the mystery. The 1923 buffalo nickel was not being struck during the 1950s. Its production belongs to the 1920s, while the 1950s came decades later, when these coins were already agging survivors rather than newly minted pieces. That later era does matter to their story, because by then millions of buffalo nickels had passed through pockets, cash registers, banks and collections, while many had become heavily worn. The 1923 issue itself had a substantial reported mintage of 35,715,000 pieces, so rarity does not come simply from finding the year and the missing mint mark. The real fascination begins with condition, strike quality, surfaces, and unusual characteristics. Look closely at the date. Are the numerals naturally defined, or do they show suspicious alteration? Study the lettering and the edge for signs of damage. Examine the reverse for a strong horn, clear lettering, and well-defined design details. Collectors also understand that famous buffalo nickel errors exist elsewhere in the series, including the 1937 D three-legged variety, created after excessive polishing altered the reverse die, and that variety has brought thousands of dollars at auction. Genuine doubled dies, unusual die states, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and other mint-made anomalies can transform an otherwise familiar coin into something much more interesting, but an unusual appearance alone does not prove an error. That is where careful examination becomes essential. Check the weight against the standard specifications, study the metal color under neutral lighting, inspect whether the strike is properly aligned, look for unusual rim expansion or distortion, and examine the lettering for genuine doubling rather than damage or machine doubling. A collector who once spends a coin without looking closely may never know what was missed, and that is one of the most painful possibilities in coin collecting. The treasure can be in your hand and still disappear because nobody stopped to investigate it. Now comes the question that makes people look twice at every old buffalo nickel. What could a truly exceptional example bring? Here the numbers need to be handled carefully. A normal circulated 1923 Philadelphia Buffalo nickel is not automatically a thousands of dollars coin, and current sales show ordinary examples changing hands for modest amounts, while high-grade certified pieces can reach several $100s. But the upper end of the ladder becomes dramatically different when condition, rarity, and certification combine. A notable Buffalo nickel discovery can enter the $5,000 range, while extraordinary examples from the series have crossed $10,000, $20,000, and far beyond. A 1923 Buffalo nickel graded MS67 Plus by PCGS with CAC approval sold through Great Collections for $14,062.5, demonstrating just how much exceptional preservation can matter even for a date that is not normally considered one of the series' greatest rarities. And the broader Buffalo nickel series has produced spectacular outcomes. A 1926 SMS65 sold for $99,000, while elite examples of famous varieties have also reached tens of thousands of dollars. So if you hear a dramatic 5,000 to $80,000 claim attached to a 1923 nickel, do not assume the number applies to every coin bearing that date. An $80,000 outcome would require an extraordinarily rare and convincingly authenticated circumstance, not merely a shiny 1923 with no mint mark. That distinction could save a collector from both disappointment and a costly mistake. The emotional power of this hobby comes from the possibility that someone somewhere can pull an overlooked coin from an old box, inherited collection, estate group, or forgotten drawer and discover that what appeared ordinary deserves serious attention. But the responsible collector does not rush to sell because of a headline. Photograph the coin, avoid cleaning it, document its condition, compare its diagnostics with trusted references, and if something genuinely unusual appears, seek professional authentication and grading before making any major decision. That is what makes the 1923 Buffalo nickel so compelling. Its greatest secret may not be a spectacular error stamped across the surface, but the possibility that decades of wear have concealed the very details a collector needs to see. Imagine someone finding one in an old family collection, spending it because it looked like nothing more than an obsolete nickel, never realizing that its exceptional preservation or unusual mint-made characteristic might have deserved expert attention. The lesson is not that every 1923 nickel is a hidden fortune. The lesson is that valuable discoveries begin with curiosity. If you have one, place it under good light without rubbing or polishing it, inspect the date, study the portrait and bison, check the rim and alignment, verify its weight with an accurate scale, and watch carefully for authentic doubling or other evidence of a genuine mint-made anomaly. Most importantly, let a qualified professional determine whether an unusual feature is real before you sell, trade, or make a financial decision. The Buffalo nickel series has already demonstrated that an overlooked coin can surprise the market, with exceptional specimens bringing results far beyond their original 5-cent face value. And perhaps that is the most fascinating part of the 1923 without mint mark story. The coin does not need to shout that it is special. Sometimes it simply waits for someone patient enough to notice what everyone else ignored. But our search through America's overlooked coins does not end here, because the next coin carries its own mystery, its own set of clues, and another detail that can completely change the way collectors see an ordinary-looking piece of pocket change. A coin can sit unnoticed for generations and still carry a story powerful enough to make collectors stop in their tracks, and the 1924 Buffalo nickel is one of those coins. In a documented auction, an exceptionally preserved 1924 Philadelphia Buffalo nickel graded PCGS MS67 brought $16,800, while another MS67 example had previously sold for $4,080, revealing just how dramatically condition and eye appeal can change the fate of the same date. But before anyone sees a number like that, there's something much more important to understand. This is not a Lincoln cent, and the famous VDB controversy does not belong to this coin. The 1924 piece in your hand is a 5-cent buffalo nickel designed by James Earl Fraser, with the powerful Native American portrait facing right on the obverse and the American bison dominating the reverse. There is no mint mark because it was struck at Philadelphia, and that absence is completely normal. In fact, Philadelphia produced 21,620,000 of these nickels in 1924, compared with only 5,258,000 at Denver and just 1,437,000 at San Francisco. And that is where the story becomes unexpectedly fascinating, because the ordinary-looking Philadelphia issue was produced in far greater numbers than its San Francisco counterpart, yet truly beautiful survivors are much harder to find than those original production figures suggest. The nickel alloy itself was 75% copper and 25% nickel. The coin measured about 21.2 millimeters and weighed 5 grams, and its plain edge gave collectors another physical clue when examining an example outside its holder. Fraser's design was bold, sculptural, and unusually demanding to strike, and every surviving coin carries evidence of the struggle between the hard metal, the dies, and the pressure required to bring that artwork into existence. The deeper mystery begins when you stop looking at the date and start looking at the quality of the strike. Buffalo nickels are famous among collectors because their raised design elements could lose definition surprisingly quickly, and the hard nickel composition made sharp strikes especially challenging. On the 1924 Philadelphia issue, the absence of a mint mark is therefore not the exciting part. The exciting part is what remains visible around it. Study the Native American's hair and cheek, the separation of the braid, and the contours around the eye. Then turn the coin over and examine the bison's horn, shoulder, tail, and the lettering surrounding the denomination. A weakly struck coin can make important features appear worn even when the coin has actually seen less circulation, while a sharply struck survivor can preserve a remarkable amount of Fraser's original sculptural detail. This is also where collectors can become victims of the most dangerous kind of near-miss, assuming that every strange-looking feature must be a valuable mint error. The Buffalo series contains genuine rarities such as the 1916 double die obverse, the 1918 17D overdate, the famous 1937 D three-legged variety, and the extraordinary 1936 D three-and-a-half-legged variety. But those are distinct issues and should never be casually attached to a 1924 Philadelphia nickel simply because its design looks unusual. A genuine error or unusual die characteristic must be supported by recognizable diagnostics, not imagination. That is why the careful collector studies metal tone rather than polishing it, checks whether the strike is centered and aligned, examines the rim for abnormal expansion or distortion, and compares suspected doubling against reliable references. A coin discovered in an old drawer might look dull, dark, or almost lifeless after decades of storage, yet the surface itself can contain clues about its history. One careless cleaning can destroy the natural appearance that collectors value, while one rushed sale can permanently end the search for what the coin might actually have been. Only now does the price ladder become interesting, because the documented market shows that extraordinary condition can turn this seemingly common Philadelphia date into a serious collector prize. A 1924 Buffalo nickel graded MS-64 sold for $329 at Heritage, while an MS-65 example brought $660 at Stack's Bowers in 2024. An MS-66 sold for $5,040 in the same auction house's August 2024 showcase, and an MS-67 reached $16,800 in November 2024. That gives us a realistic upward ladder. Around $5,000 for a notably preserved example, into the $10,000 to $20,000 territory for truly elite certified survivors, and potentially toward $120,000 only in a hypothetical extraordinary scenario, involving a major authenticated error, remarkable provenance, or an exceptional discovery. Because there is no documented $120,000 auction record for the ordinary 1924 Philadelphia Buffalo nickel, in the sources reviewed here. That distinction matters. The most spectacular prices in the Buffalo Nickel series belong to different dates and varieties. PCGS records, for example, show the 1926 S reaching $322,000, while the 1924 Philadelphia issue's recorded auction high is $25,200. So imagine the collector who finds a 1924 nickel in a box inherited from a relative and almost spends it because the date seems common. Imagine another person who sees a dark surface and assumes the coin has no potential, never realizing that the underlying strike is unusually sharp. These are the near misses that create legendary collecting stories, not because every old nickel is a fortune, but because the difference between an overlooked survivor and a premium specimen can be hidden in details that take only minutes to inspect. If your coin has unusually crisp lettering, strong bison detail, clean fields, a natural copper gold or gray tone, and an undisturbed rim, document it carefully before doing anything else. Compare its weight with the standard 5-gram specification, inspect both sides under consistent lighting, and never scrape, buff, or chemically clean the surface to make it look more valuable. And perhaps that is the real power of the 1924 Buffalo Nickel. It does not need a dramatic mint mark, a famous VDB controversy, or a sensational headline to become fascinating. Its story is quieter. It is the story of a Philadelphia coin made in an era when Fraser's bold design was still challenging the machinery of the mint. A coin that entered ordinary American commerce and then spent decades disappearing into pockets, drawers, collections, and forgotten family possessions. The collector's advantage is patience. Look at the rim from different angles, verify that the strike is properly aligned, examine the date and lettering for genuine die characteristics, and study the bison's most vulnerable details without disturbing the surface. If something truly unusual appears, resist the temptation to announce a fortune or rush to sell. Professional authentication can determine whether the feature is a genuine mint-made characteristic, post-mint damage, or simply the normal result of wear and striking. The documented MS-67 result of $16,800 shows what exceptional preservation can accomplish, but it also shows why grade, rarity, and certification matter so much. And for the person who finds one unexpectedly, that moment can be unforgettable, not because a 5-cent coin automatically changes a life, but because discovering something history forgot to hide is one of the great thrills of collecting. The 1924 Philadelphia Buffalo Nickel may look quiet compared with the famous rarities of the series, yet that quiet appearance is exactly what makes the hunt so addictive. And with that clue in place, we can move deeper into the collection, because the third coin takes this search in a completely different direction, and the detail that separates an ordinary example from a remarkable one is even easier to overlook. In the world of rare coins, one of the most revealing moments came when a 1936 D Buffalo nickel carrying the famous 3.5-legged variety crossed the auction block for $20,700 in a stacks auction, proving that a tiny alteration in a working die could turn an ordinary 5-cent piece into a serious numismatic prize. But here is where the mystery surrounding the 1936 Buffalo nickel becomes even more fascinating. The coin we are examining is the 1936 Philadelphia issue, recognizable by the complete absence of a mint mark, and it is not the famous 3-legged variety. That distinction is crucial. The legendary missing leg effect belongs to the 1937 D Buffalo nickel and the related 1936 D 3.5-legged variety, both created by unusual die modification at Denver, not to the normal 1936 Philadelphia coin. Yet that does not make the Philadelphia coin uninteresting. Quite the opposite. The 1936 issue was produced in enormous numbers compared with the truly scarce varieties, and surviving examples can range from heavily worn pocket pieces to astonishingly preserved specimens. One PCGS recorded 1936 Philadelphia Buffalo nickel graded MS-68 sold for $18,000 at Heritage Auctions in August 2025. A remarkable result for a coin that can look completely ordinary to an untrained eye. That contrast is what makes this date so captivating. Two coins can carry exactly the same year, the same missing mint mark, and the same 5-cent denomination, yet their surfaces, strike quality, preservation, and microscopic characteristics can send them into completely different collecting worlds. The design itself adds another layer of drama. James Earl Fraser's Native American portrait and powerful bison were already challenging the mint's machinery, with broad raised areas that could lose detail during circulation or appear weak because of striking pressure. On a worn example, the face may seem almost featureless, while the bison's horn and shoulder can fade into the surrounding metal. But on a superior strike, those same areas can emerge with startling definition, revealing why collectors still find this design unforgettable nearly a century later. Now imagine finding one of these coins in an old family collection, perhaps mixed among ordinary nickels that nobody had examined for decades. You turn it over and notice something unusual around the bison's legs. For a moment, your heart jumps. Could this be the famous missing leg variety? This is exactly where knowledge separates a fascinating discovery from a costly mistake. The famous 1936 D variety is identified by a distinctive alteration on the reverse, and authenticated examples have brought thousands of dollars even in circulated grades. A PCGS recorded VF35 example sold for $5,800 at Stacks in 2008, while an MS63 example reached $20,700 in 2009. A genuine 1936 D 3.5-legged nickel can show the diagnostic feature without needing imagination or exaggerated lighting, and auction descriptions repeatedly emphasize that the characteristic can be readily visible on legitimate examples. But a 1936 Philadelphia nickel without a mint mark should not be transformed into that variety simply because one leg looks faint. Where weak striking, scratches, contact marks, and uneven surfaces can all create deceptive appearances. That is why the real investigation begins with the smallest details. Examine the bison's legs under stable lighting, follow the contours of the remaining design, study the lettering for unusual die characteristics, inspect the rim for expansion or distortion, and look at the relationship between the obverse and reverse for proper die alignment. Then examine the metal tone without cleaning it. A natural gray, brown, golden, or mixed patina can tell part of the coin's story, while an unnaturally bright surface may indicate later treatment rather than exceptional preservation. Collectors have lost opportunities by spending old coins before examining them, and others have nearly sold valuable pieces for ordinary prices because they assumed every unusual feature was damage. The thrill is not simply finding something that looks strange, it is proving why it looks strange. And then comes the price ladder, the moment when curiosity begins to meet the real collecting market. A normal circulated 1936 Philadelphia Buffalo nickel can be worth only a modest amount, and even certified mint state examples are often far below the headline figures attached to famous varieties. PCGS auction records show a 1936 MS63 example selling for just $33, while another MS65 brought $106, demonstrating how dramatically the market separates ordinary survivors from exceptional ones. At the higher end, however, the picture changes. The 1936 Philadelphia issue reached $18,000 for an MS68 example in a 2025 heritage auction. So an up-price ladder beginning around $5,000 can make sense for an unusually preserved or otherwise remarkable specimen, rising through $10,000, $20,000, and potentially much higher when extraordinary condition, a genuinely rare characteristic, or exceptional provenance enters the equation. But a $120,000 outcome should not be presented as a recorded value for the ordinary 1936 Philadelphia Buffalo nickel. That figure would represent an extreme hypothetical scenario requiring extraordinary rarity, authentication, and market demand, not a normal expectation. The documented $20,700 result for the 1936 D 3.5-legged variety demonstrates how a legitimate variety can cross into serious money territory, while the $18,000 Philadelphia MS68 result shows that even the regular issue can become highly desirable when preservation reaches an elite level. And that is where the emotional side of collecting takes over. Imagine someone buying an inherited coin collection for a small amount, discovering a beautifully preserved 1936 nickel inside, and realizing only later that its condition places it among the finest known. Imagine another collector noticing a strange-looking bison leg and almost dismissing it as damage, only to have an expert confirm a legitimate variety. These are the near misses that haunt collectors, the moments when history was sitting inches away, waiting for somebody to look closely enough. So if a 1936 Buffalo nickel without a mint mark is sitting in your collection, do not rush to clean it, polish it, or sell it because someone online claims that every strange-looking leg is a fortune. Start with observation. Check the metal tone, examine the strike clarity, inspect the rim from several angles, confirm that the obverse and reverse are properly aligned, study the bison's legs and surrounding details, and look closely at the lettering for genuine die characteristics rather than damage. Most importantly, remember the key distinction. The famous 3.5-legged 1936 variety is a Denver issue, so a genuine example should carry the Denver D mint mark. A Philadelphia 1936 nickel without a mint mark is a different coin and must be evaluated on its own merits. If something truly unusual appears, professional authentication is the safest next step before making any major selling decision. The difference between a $5 coin, a $500 coin, a $5,000 coin, and an exceptional five-figure discovery can depend on details too subtle to judge from a quick glance, and that is precisely why responsible collectors slow down when everyone else is rushing. The 1936 Buffalo nickel teaches a powerful lesson. Sometimes the greatest discovery is not the coin everyone thinks they see, but the truth hidden beneath the first impression. And with that mystery finally uncovered, our journey moves forward to the fourth coin, another seemingly ordinary piece, with a detail that can completely change its story once you know exactly where to look. In 2007, a Buffalo nickel with an extraordinary double die reverse brought $104,650 at auction. A stunning reminder that a coin originally worth 5 cents can become a six-figure object when rarity, condition, and a genuine mint-made variety collide. But there is an important twist before we go any further. That record belongs to the 1935 Philadelphia Buffalo nickel double die reverse, not a Denver coin with a D mint mark. For the Buffalo nickel carrying the D, one of the most fascinating documented varieties is the 1935 DD repunched mint mark, while the famous dramatic doubled reverse is a separate 1935 Philadelphia variety. That distinction is exactly the kind of detail that separates serious collectors from people chasing internet rumors. The 1935 D Buffalo nickel itself had a mintage of 12,092,000, making it the scarcest regular-issue Buffalo nickel of the 1935-1938 period, and PCGS records an impressive $34,800 auction result for a superb MS-67 Plus example. The coin's identity is unmistakable. James Earl Fraser's Native American portrait dominates the obverse, while the reverse presents the massive American bison above the words United States of America, EPLUBUSUNUM, and 5 cents. Its composition is 75% copper and 25% nickel. It weighs 5 grams, measures 21.2 millimeters, and carries a plain edge. But the real suspense begins beneath that familiar design, because a tiny D beneath the denomination can lead you toward a story of hand-positioned mint marks, die preparation, scarce surviving varieties, and the microscopic evidence collectors spend years learning to recognize. The fascinating part is that the D variety is not simply a case of letters being accidentally printed twice. On the 1935 DD Buffalo nickel, the variety is classified as a repunched mint mark, FS502, meaning the mint mark itself shows evidence associated with being punched into the working die more than once. That makes the visual hunt completely different from the famous 1935 double die reverse, where the strongest doubling appears on 5 cents and additional doubling can be seen in EPLUBUSUNUM, with the variety regarded by PCGS as the only major double die reverse in the Buffalo nickel series. So if you have a Buffalo nickel with a D, do not immediately expect to find those spectacular doubled letters. Instead, begin at the mint mark area and study the D under magnification, looking for evidence that its shape contains a genuine secondary impression rather than damage, abrasion, or lighting distortion. Then widen the investigation. Does the strike have unusual depth? Are the lettering edges crisp or mushy? Does the rim remain consistently formed around the entire circumference? Or is there an abnormal expansion that could indicate a striking problem? Is the metal tone naturally aged, or does it look unnaturally bright from later cleaning? And does the coin's alignment make sense when you rotate it carefully? These small clues matter because Buffalo nickels were not easy coins to strike sharply. The raised portrait and massive bison demanded substantial pressure, and weakly struck horns are particularly common on 1935D examples. PCGS also describes the surviving 1935D population as limited at the highest grades, with fewer than 24 combined PCGS and NGC examples in MS67, and only one NGC-graded MS68 noted by Graysheet. Imagine a collector discovering such a coin inside an inherited group and nearly dismissing it because the surfaces look old and the D appears insignificant. That is how near misses happen. The potentially important clue is sitting right in front of someone, but nobody knows where to look. Now the price ladder begins to reveal why these distinctions matter. The $5,000 level can become realistic for a particularly desirable, authenticated, high-grade Buffalo nickel or an important variety, while the climb toward $10,000, $20,000, and beyond depends increasingly on rarity and preservation rather than the simple presence of a D. The 1935D regular issue itself reached $34,800 in an MS67 plus Stack's Bowers auction in 2021, showing what elite preservation can accomplish even without turning the coin into a famous double die rarity. Meanwhile, the separate 1935 Philadelphia double die reverse demonstrates the extraordinary ceiling that a truly rare variety can reach. PCGS records $104,650 for an MS65 example sold by Bowers and Mariner in 2007, and another MS64 example of the variety brought $9,600 at Stack's Bowers in 2021. That gives collectors a dramatic up price ladder, from approximately $5,000 for a notable authenticated discovery, through $10,000 and $20,000 territory for exceptional pieces, toward $35,000 or more for elite 1935D condition, and potentially approaching $120,000 only as an extraordinary upper-end scenario for a uniquely important, authenticated rarity. Not as a normal price, for every Buffalo nickel with a D, there is no documented $120,000 auction result for the ordinary 1935D repunchment mark variety in the sources reviewed here. So anyone promising that amount simply because a coin has a D should immediately slow down. The real thrill is in the evidence. A collector might buy an old group for a modest sum, discover a sharply preserved Denver nickel, notice something unusual around the mint mark, and send it to a professional grading service almost as an afterthought. Then comes the moment when the attribution confirms what the naked eye could only suspect. That is the kind of discovery that can transform an overlooked 5-cent coin into the centerpiece of a collection, and it explains why experienced collectors examine every promising Buffalo nickel before deciding that it is ordinary. So if a Buffalo nickel carrying the D mint mark is sitting in your collection, the smartest move is not to chase a headline price. It is to investigate the coin carefully and preserve the evidence. Examine the mint mark for authentic repunching, inspect the reverse lettering for genuine doubling, study the depth and sharpness of the strike, check the rim for consistency, examine the metal tone under neutral light, and look for alignment that makes sense rather than relying on a single photograph or dramatic magnification. Never polish or chemically clean the coin in an attempt to reveal details, because altering the surface can reduce its collector appeal and destroy evidence that an expert needs to evaluate. And remember the crucial distinction. A demint mark does not automatically mean double die, while a genuine double die reverse can belong to the 1935 Philadelphia issue without any mint mark at all. The documented $104,650 result proves how powerful a legitimate Buffalo nickel variety can become, while the $34,801,935 D result proves that exceptional condition alone can create remarkable demand. If your coin shows something genuinely unusual, professional authentication should come before any rushed sale, because the difference between damage, a repunched mint mark, a doubled die, and an ordinary strike characteristic can mean thousands of dollars, and sometimes far more. That is the lesson hidden inside this seemingly familiar Denver Buffalo nickel. The fortune is not in the rumor, but in the tiny piece of evidence that can survive nearly a century and tell you exactly what happened at the mint. And if you enjoy these careful searches through America's overlooked coinage, consider subscribing to Old Coin Cave so you can follow the next discoveries with us. There is no promise that every coin will be valuable, but every genuine story is worth investigating, and the next one may contain a clue that even experienced collectors have overlooked.